Russia is so desperate that it's trading away control of its own frontier just to stay afloat. While the world watches Moscow bleed in Ukraine, a quieter, more permanent shift is unfolding in the east, where China and North Korea are embedding themselves across Russia's Far East. This isn't random pressure from Kyiv or NATO. The Kremlin has turned a vast frontier into a bargaining chip. What once symbolized imperial strength now functions as a platform for foreign influence. Chinese investors and North Korean labor are remaking the region in exchange for assistance. In this breakdown, we'll track the deals, the consequences, and why Moscow may never reclaim full control. Let's start at the root cause of Russia's desperation, the war in Ukraine. Now, in its fourth year, it has drained Russia on every front: military, economic, and demographic. Estimates suggest more than 1 million Russians have been killed or wounded, gutting the pool of young, able-bodied men. Equipment tells the same story. The military is running on aging Soviet hardware and low-quality parts. Moscow now relies on imports of basic electronics and drones from China, Iran, and even North Korea. Russia's global power projection has contracted. Sanctions deepened the fracture. Russia's access to Western finance and technology was cut off. What remains of export income tilts toward China, and a short list of friendly partners. The ruble has endured freefall after freefall. Inflation erodes savings. The federal budget leans heavily on war spending. Nukes and oil still exist, but global power projection has shrunk. The decline is most visible in the Far East. Russia's Far East stretches from eastern Siberia to the Pacific. It covers nearly 40% of the national territory and houses about 5% of the population. It borders China, North Korea, and the Sea of Japan, including Primorsky, Sakhalin, and Kamchatka. The region is resource-rich and strategically placed, with vital Pacific ports. For decades, however, Moscow treated it like a distant outpost, useful as a symbol, costly to maintain. Now, with budgets strained and options limited, the Kremlin is trading access for survival. Official branding calls it development, investment, and regional growth. Behind press photos and ribbon cuttings, the deals are plain. China gets long-term leases, infrastructure control, and first pick of resources. North Korea receives timber contracts, transit routes, and discrete arms shipments. Russia, in return, gets what it can no longer source alone. This isn't a grand partnership, it's triage, keeping available partners satisfied enough to keep the money and materials flowing. On the ground, Chinese managers run key operations. Russian staff handle paperwork, but amounts to de facto operational control in key sites. The deeper the deals go, the harder they are to unwind. Russia-China trade reached $245 billion last year, up from $190 billion 3 years prior. However, Russia sells oil and gas to China at steep discounts, 30 to 40% below global benchmarks, while Chinese goods flood Russian markets. This dynamic, coupled with long leases and ownership stakes in Far East energy projects, gives Beijing significant leverage over Moscow, especially with power of Siberia. Two pending and over 60% of Russian energy exports now going east. While Europe scrambles and North Korea benefits from fuel concessions, Russia trades discounted energy for political support, expanding Beijing's leverage over regional infrastructure and pricing. The build-out extends beyond energy. Chinese companies are upgrading ports, expanding railways, and constructing logistics hubs tuned to long-term strategy as much as trade. North Korean labor teams support construction and timber operations. For Moscow, the motive is necessity. For its neighbors, it is a low-friction gain in influence. The Tumen River region, where Russia, China, and North Korea meet, exemplifies historical territorial disputes. Russia seized land from China in the 1800s via unequal treaties. Treaty of Aigun, 1858. Treaty of Peking, 1860. Cutting China off from the Sea of Japan. This loss remains a national humiliation. Today, China exerts influence through leasings, financing, and population, rather than military invasion. North Korea's goals are narrower but crafted. It sees Russian weakness as a path to secure resources and safe zones for its workforce. China brings capital. North Korea brings manpower. Russia accepts both. The old 1959 railway link is now joined by a new road bridge that connects the three countries directly. On paper, that's trade and development. In practice, it's access, especially to the Pacific, which China has long sought from its northeast. Reports indicate Chinese firms lease over 1 million hectares of Russian farmland and control mining operations in the Far East through long-term deals, often at low prices, or in exchange for vital supplies like military electronics. Moscow maintains nominal ownership, but Beijing profits. This land-for-survival strategy provides Russia with critical goods needed to sustain its war and economy. The demographic shift is real. Roughly 2 million Chinese nationals are living and working between Vladivostok and the Urals. In several cities, they form local majorities. Chinese businesses lead in retail, agriculture, and construction. North Korean laborers fill mining, logging, and farm crews. There are about 15,000 North Korean workers now in Russia, with plans for up to 50,000 more, including in war zones like occupied Ukraine, potentially earning Pyongyang up to $1.3 billion a year. Entire towns depend on Chinese capital and North Korean labor. Sovereignty looks intact on a map. In practice, it is diluted by supply chains. Dual-use infrastructure adds another layer. A road that moves freight can move armored vehicles. Power stations that brighten border towns support communications. Cargo ports can host naval logistics. Each project shifts from commercial to strategic in a crisis. Russian planners see it. Resources tied down in Ukraine leave little room to respond. The Kremlin cannot afford to alienate Beijing or Pyongyang, so the language stays friendly. Win-win. Outcomes suggest asymmetry despite win-win language. China's grand strategy involves establishing a northern maritime route via the Sea of Japan, bypassing critical choke points like the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. This aligns with the Belt and Road's aim to build logistics, foster dependency, and exert influence. Combined with the Polar Silk Road and Arctic investments, Beijing is positioning for greater influence along the Northern Sea route. This shorter Asia-Europe path, while presented as commerce, strategically shapes northern shipping governance and reduces reliance on Western-controlled choke points. North Korea benefits from infrastructure, fuel, currency, and political relevance, gaining leverage from Russia's need for labor and logistics. The Tumen Delta faces severe environmental degradation from dredging and roadwork, impacting endangered species like the Amur tiger. Forests are rapidly declining due to logging and industrial expansion, with studies indicating approximately 6 million hectares lost and an annual boreal loss of 20,000 kilometers. Water and air quality are deteriorating from construction and factories. Despite calls for transparent impact assessments, development continues. Chinese state-backed firms dominate large projects in the Far East, shifting economic control. Private Chinese investors establish logistics and retail centers, leading to bilingual signage and Chinese businesses outcompeting Russian ones. Mandarin is being taught in schools, and local governance favors Chinese investors, aligning the region with Chinese supply chains. Not everyone is quiet. In Primorsky, officials have pushed back rhetorically. One line stands out: the region has never historically belonged to China. The message isn't just about textbooks, it's about identity and agency. Workers sidelined from major builds voice anger as foreign crews win bids. Small protests call for tighter rules on land deals and leases. They rarely make headlines, but they add up to a current of resistance. The war economy leaves little room for pride. Budgets are thin. Trade ties westward are broken. Practicality defeats patriotism in procurement. Moscow actively counters China's influence by engaging other Asian nations. India has deepened energy and joint venture deals, bypassing Beijing. Vietnam is discussing fisheries and logistics. Russia also seeks cooperation with Indonesia and Malaysia. This aims to dilute reliance on China, despite challenges like a shrinking population and modest returns compared to China's investments, signifying Moscow's attempt to regain agency. The hard math persists. The eastern frontier does not deliver quick wins. Fewer than 7 million people are scattered across an area larger than Europe. Keeping it functioning costs billions each year, money Moscow lacks during wartime. So concessions are framed as pragmatic development. Let China build a port, jobs follow. Let North Korea supply workers, construction accelerates. On paper, Russian ownership holds. On the ground, control is shared and increasingly uneven. Neighbors are watching. Japan sees risk on its northern flank. Chinese access to the Sea of Japan could reshape patrol patterns, shipping control, and even naval resupply within reach of Japanese waters. South Korea sees a different kind of problem. North Korea's expanded role as broker gives Pyongyang leverage beyond China, enabling it to extract fuel, funds, and concessions that could feed weapons programs and harden negotiating postures towards Seoul. In Washington, analysts track a quiet logistics web extending across Eurasia into what used to be Moscow's uncontested ground. Each new corridor in the Russian Far East complicates efforts to contain Beijing. Calls grow for a stronger Pacific posture, tighter ally coordination, and tech partnerships to counter China's northern advance. NATO, still focused on Ukraine, sees the ripple. The more Russia's east drifts under Chinese control, the more Moscow depends on Beijing everywhere else, including in Europe. Analysts propose 3 scenarios for the region. The most probable is slow absorption, with China investing heavily in infrastructure, leases, and special zones over 5 to 10 years. Navigation rights will normalize, and Chinese and Russian communities will integrate, leaving land formerly Russian, but operations effectively Chinese and North Korean. Escalation is a second possibility, where a weakened Moscow leads Beijing to formalize control through tighter legal terms and security contractors, effectively turning parts of the frontier into Chinese territory, while North Korea expands its logistics role for aid. The third path is breakdown. Russian instability could lead local governors to align with Chinese investors for order, and migration could shift demographics, giving Beijing de facto control without needing to ask. This would prompt strong reactions from Japan, South Korea, and the US, transforming the quiet frontier into a flashpoint. Even in calm scenarios, legal and administrative complexities arise. Who governs a 99-year lease on Russian soil, managed by a Chinese firm and staffed by North Korean labor? Reversing these long-standing arrangements is difficult. Reclaiming territory lost in war is easier than reclaiming territory ceded by contract, when livelihoods, education, and supply chains rely on foreign systems. China leverages patience, while North Korea gains relevance and revenue from its deployed workers and opened infrastructure. Russia is running out of moves. The eastern frontier is slipping, not through treachery, but exhaustion. War costs mount. Western capital is gone. Partners with divergent agendas exact their price. Each practical decision solves a short-term problem and creates a long-term strategic loss. Beijing and Pyongyang never needed to invade. They waited for a window and walked through it. What followed is not a classic takeover. It is a consolidation of opportunity. Official maps remain unchanged. On the ground, the transformation is visible. The frontier belongs to Russia in theory. But theory doesn't pour concrete, operate cranes, or pay wages. For now, Moscow can claim the title. Control that exists only in law is the weakest kind. You can swap flags. You cannot easily reroute pipelines, dismantle logistics webs, or unwind demographic shifts once they take root. The story here was never just land. It is timings, leverage, and the power of quiet moves. China and North Korea saw the opening and moved with precision. Russia, focused on survival, recognized the cost too late. An empire that once redrew borders by force now watches its own fade without a shot fired. The question isn't whether the balance is shifting, it already has. The question is, can it be reversed before the contracts, corridors, and communities make the change permanent?